Environmental and rights groups will be presenting their case on what they describe as the flawed public participation process involving the extension of the lifespan of the Koeberg nuclear power station in the Western Cape. The Southern African Faith Communities Environment Institute, along with the Green Connection, the Koeberg Alert Alliance and a number of other groups will be presenting their cases. The hearings are scheduled to be held over the next 2 weeks in Tableview, Atlantis and Athlone. Joining us now is Francesca De Gasparis, Director at Safcei. Francesca, appreciate your time. Can you elaborate on Safcei's perspective regarding the National Nuclear Regulator public participation process for the lifetime operation extension of the nuclear power plants?
Well, I mean, firstly, these hearings are public, and so few people in Cape Town are aware of them. There's only been 3 hearings set at this time. And we have so little information about the process of this life extension of Koeberg. It's 40 years old. The government wants to extend it by another 20 years. That is a major and costly undertaking. We've been having to ask through legal matters for the safety case. We still don't know the true cost. I mean, there's so many issues with it in terms of not following due process and not really consulting properly with the general public. Such a major decision.
So let's talk about due process. You're pointing that out as something that hasn't been done. What would have been due process in your view?
Well, when you look at how other countries do this kind of major undertaking and major cost to refurbish a nuclear power station, firstly, you get all the facts up front, and they're accessible, and so we can all know, what is this truly going to cost South Africa to extend the nuclear power station? What does it mean in terms of the true costs? The waste, where's that going to go for the next 20 years? That wasn't designed into the original nuclear power station plan. So these are all new and additional issues. When you look at countries like France, they have a lot of nuclear power stations. They helped us build this one. A number of them, they've looked at it, they've looked at the issues with the nuclear power station, and they've made a choice whether to decommission it or to extend its life. And I don't feel like we're getting a chance, and experts have said we don't have the kinds of information that we need in order to make a valid and true decision on this. And without the proper information and without the true costs, what we're being asked to do is essentially say, yeah, this is a great idea, and you're going to have to pay the bill later. You know, that's not the way we should be making decisions. And we have such a bad track record in South Africa. We're in this energy crisis because of poor decision making and because of poor handling of our energy fleet. The idea of extending a nuclear power station with so little information, with so much secrecy, really does raise alarm bells.
Now, the one thing that comes to mind, based on what you've said, where you suggest that there's an absence of information, that the public are not sufficiently vested in this issue, is, are people genuinely interested in the issue around power stations, or are they more inclined to, do we have power, do we not have power? Here is a solution, right? And maybe do not have a general understanding of how that may impact them. What people want, I'd imagine, is that they want power, and if the relicensing or recommissioning of the 2 Koeberg stations allows them that, then that is what they are likely to support. Is that a correct perspective?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are saying we really need this, just go with it. But the truth, you know, we need to look at the price tag that's attached to these things. We need to look at the safety case. You know, after the fact, if we find ourselves having to clean up a nuclear mess, if there's an accident, if we find that actually this worked out way more expensive than bringing in new renewable energy, which would be a much more effective way of dealing with the need for energy in South Africa, then I think people will be saying, gosh, why didn't we take this more seriously? Why didn't we look at the true cost? And until we know what that is, it's kind of like going out for dinner and saying, I really feel like eating something, but we don't know what the budget is. And when you get the bill at the end of the day, can you afford that meal? And that's what, you know, Eskom's been increasing our electricity tariffs, the cost that we pay per month, by double inflation this year, almost quadruple inflation last year. We can't, as South Africans, as people living in South Africa, continue to afford to pay for costly energy mistakes. And without knowing what the true cost of the nuclear power station extension, without knowing the safety issues, which are part of that cost, how can we make the right decision for whether we want to have it or not?
So I'd imagine that you and your team, Francesca, have done a measure of homework to look at potential costs of a job of this magnitude versus the alternative. So what is the alternative if these power stations are not re-licensed or recommissioned?
Well, I heard that there was an estimate for decommissioning of 60 billion rand. That's an estimate. That's where the true cost of nuclear comes in. You can't just kick the can down the road. You need to actually say, actually, this is a radioactive way of producing energy. The waste is expensive to store and difficult to contain. No one's found a safe way of storing the waste from nuclear power stations. People living in the Northern Cape have been asked to tolerate the idea of high radioactive waste being moved there, which wasn't there before. Before that, it was low level radioactive waste. So there's all we need to be looking at much more seriously and be aware of. Most people are overwhelmed with the costs of daily life and all the things that we have to deal with every day. So we do feel it's important that we as civil society raise people's awareness on this issue. Let them know that these are the kinds of energy decision-making that government is doing right now that will cost us in the decades to come and possibly generations ahead. So this is a serious matter and it needs to be taken as such.
Now, we're not the only country that relies on nuclear for energy, are we? So what's happening with other countries and just how susceptible are they to these dangers of nuclear and nuclear waste? Because I think one way of doing this is to draw parallels to what's happening in other countries, and if there are challenges, then present those challenges to the public or certainly to the authorities.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. And when you look at the international regulations, are we complying with them? Are we working with best practice? When we look at things like safety around Koeberg, are all the systems truly in place? Does the city know what it needs to do if something happens? These are things which we should be drawing on what's happening in the international realm and at least standing up to that level of assurance and public safety. And I think these are the things that we need to be seeing happen in South Africa. If we are going to have such dangerous and costly energy systems, then we need to know that all the systems are in place to keep the public safe and the public are informed and aware. You'll see that in countries like France, who has a lot of nuclear power stations, they're not keeping those nuclear power stations extending their lives unless their cost benefits and the safety issues and the problems that those nuclear power stations have can be addressed. We know that Koeberg has cracks in its containment buildings, the cement. And when cement cracks, people know in their own homes what happens when cement cracks. The water gets in, it's no longer safe, it's no longer secure. How do you repair that effectively for a nuclear power station? Unfortunately, when you talk about refurbishing something like a nuclear power station, you're talking about actually having to weaken some of those structures to get in to replace some of the parts. It's not a simple matter. It's extremely complex. I'm certainly not an expert, but I've been listening to the experts, and I've been hearing some of the challenges that we face to get this right. And it is concerning, and it is something that I think that we need to have more of this conversation in the public realm.